The fashion of the colonial elite was a rich tapestry woven from the threads of status, power, and cultural identity. As the colonies across the Americas, Africa, and Asia took root under European domination, clothing became one of the most potent symbols of wealth and influence. For the elite, fashion was not merely about personal taste. It was a deliberate assertion of their social standing and a reflection of their allegiance to European ideals of refinement and civilization. In the American colonies, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries, the wealthy sought to emulate the styles of the European courts, particularly those of England, France, and Spain. The clothing of the colonial elite was characterized by elaborate fabrics, intricate designs, and the use of accessories that marked their wearers as members of the upper class. The materials used were often imported from Europe or Asia, including fine silks, velvets, and brocades, which were far beyond the reach of the lower classes. These textiles were often richly embroidered with gold and silver threads, reflecting both wealth and the wearer's connection to the latest European fashions. For men, fashion was a means of expressing authority and power. The elite male wardrobe included long coats, waistcoats, breeches, and stockings, often made from luxurious materials. The coat, typically tailored to fit the body closely, was a key item that reflected the latest trends from Europe. These coats were adorned with intricate buttons and embroidery, and they often featured broad cuffs and elaborate collars. Waistcoats were equally important, often made from contrasting fabrics to create a visually striking effect. The choice of fabric and color was essential, as certain colors like deep blues, rich reds, and purples were associated with wealth and nobility due to the expense of the dyes. Footwear was another area where wealth was displayed. The colonial elite wore fine leather shoes with high heels, a fashion borrowed from European courts. Buckles made of silver or gold were a common adornment, and stockings made of silk further emphasized the wearer's wealth. Hats were also a significant part of the male wardrobe. Tricorn hats, made from beaver felt or other fine materials, were often decorated with feathers, ribbons, or gold braid, signaling the wearer's social status. Women's fashion in the colonies was equally elaborate and designed to showcase both wealth and femininity. The elite women's wardrobe included gowns made from luxurious fabrics such as silk, satin, and velvet. These gowns were often imported from Europe or crafted locally by skilled seamstresses who followed European patterns. The style of the gowns varied over time, but they generally featured tight bodices, wide skirts supported by hoops or petticoats, and intricate detailing like lace, ribbons, and embroidery. The silhouette of a woman's gown was an important aspect of fashion, with wide panniers or hoops used to extend the width of the skirt, creating a dramatic, elegant appearance that was the height of fashion in European courts. The colors of the gowns were also a marker of status. Deep, rich colors were favored by the elite, as they were expensive to produce. Black, in particular, was a color of wealth and authority, often worn by the most powerful and influential women in society. Lighter colors, while also fashionable, were typically worn by younger women or for less formal occasions. The accessories that accompanied these gowns were equally important. Jewelry made from precious metals and stones, such as diamonds, pearls, and emeralds, was a common sight among the colonial elite. These pieces were not only beautiful, but also served as a portable form of wealth, often passed down through generations as family heirlooms. The hairstyles of elite women were another area where European influence was evident. Elaborate hairstyles, often achieved with the help of wigs, were a key component of a woman's appearance. These hairstyles could be towering structures adorned with ribbons, flowers, feathers, and even small ornaments. maintaining such hairstyles required significant time and resources, further reinforcing the idea that fashion was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. Makeup too played a role in the fashion of the colonial elite, with women often using white powder to achieve the pale complexion that was fashionable in European courts. In addition to their clothing and accessories, the colonial elite also distinguished themselves through their homes and the way they entertained. Lavish balls and dinners were opportunities to display one's wealth and taste in fashion. These events were often modeled after European courtly traditions, with guests dressing in their finest attire. The clothing worn at these events was often even more extravagant than everyday attire, with women donning their most elaborate gowns and men wearing their most luxurious coats and waistcoats. The social rules of these gatherings were strict, and one's attire was a critical aspect of making a good impression. The fashion of the colonial elite was also influenced by the climates and environments of the colonies themselves. In the warmer climates of the Southern American colonies, for example, the elite adapted European styles to be more practical in the heat. Lighter fabrics and lighter colors became more common, though they still maintained the intricate detailing and high-quality materials that marked them as clothing of the upper class. The influence of local cultures and available materials also played a role, with some colonial elites incorporating elements of indigenous or African design into their attire, although always within the context of European fashion norms. In the Caribbean and parts of Latin America, the colonial elite often drew from Spanish and Portuguese fashions, which were themselves influenced by Moorish and North African designs. This led to a distinctive style that blended European and local elements, with garments featuring bold colors, intricate patterns, and luxurious fabrics suited to the tropical climate. The elite in these regions were also known for their elaborate jewelry, often crafted from gold and silver, mined in the colonies themselves. These pieces were not only symbols of wealth, but also of the colonial power structure, with the exploitation of local resources being a key component of the colonial economy. In Africa, particularly in regions under British and French control, the colonial elite's fashion often blended European styles with local textiles and designs. The use of brightly colored fabrics, such as those made from kente cloth or bogolanfini, was common among the wealthy, though these garments were often tailored in European styles. This blending of cultures in fashion was a reflection of the complex social dynamics of the colonies, where the colonial elite sought to assert their superiority while also acknowledging the influence of local cultures. The fashion of the colonial elite was also a form of resistance against the changing social order. As the colonies grew and new wealth emerged from trade and industry, the established elite used fashion as a way to distinguish themselves from the new rich. The intricate codes of dress that had developed over centuries in Europe were carefully maintained in the colonies, with the elite using fashion to reinforce the idea that they were the true inheritors of European culture and civilization. This was particularly important in the later years of the colonial period, as revolutions and independence movements began to challenge the traditional power structures. In the end, the fashion of the colonial elite was about more than just clothing. It was a statement of identity and power. It reflected the complexities of colonial society, where European ideals were both imposed and adapted, and where the distinctions between the wealthy and the poor were as much about appearance as they were about actual wealth. The legacy of this fashion can still be seen today in the continued influence of European styles in former colonies, and in the ways that fashion continues to be a marker of status and identity in societies around the world.